You're across the table from me.
Yeah, it's a little bit different setup over here.
Yeah.
I kind of like it.
I like it too.
I have to look at you now.
I can see
without
you.
having to crank my neck or.
I know. You're so particular about your neck in particular, actually.
My neck, my back.
Yeah. Okay. What's the question?
Could have gone all in on that one.
All right, guys. The question is, what are the biggest mistakes that you've made in business?
What's the
How much time we got on this one?
Not enough. Definitely not enough. I don't like dwelling on mistakes. Let me start with that. This is a challenge for me, not because I haven't made mistakes, because I've been making plenty of mistakes. I've been in business for a long time. You have to make mistakes. You have to try things. You have to fail. But what I do know is that the more I concern myself with my mistakes, the more I'm dwelling on them, the less likely I've moved on from them and learned from them. So I'm not one to dwell. I just don't. I think if something happens and I don't like the way that it went, whether it was a mistake or it was just like a blip or just like maybe a failure, but not really
you're good
life
at that.
altering, I'm just going to keep going.
But you're also really good at not dwelling.
Yeah,
since I've met you, it's like you make a decision, you're good. Like that's it. I don't think I've ever heard you look back at things and say like, oh, I wonder what. You never play the what if game, which is awesome. And that's something I struggle with in general. Not what if, but like I tend to.
What if we would have, or
correct.
What could have, or
But you're really good at that. So, and that's rubbed off on me a little bit more, and I'm getting better at it. But for the question itself, in terms of mistakes, everything's a learning, and we talked about this in an earlier episode where it's like, how do you handle L's and whatnot? Mm-hmm. Like, is it an L? Is it a mistake? Is it a if you didn't learn from it, then truly it isn't a lot. Like you screwed up.
Yeah.
But I would say there's a lot of things that I've learned from. So taking the lesson, it's hard to go back and say like I absolutely screwed up. I will say that there are certain things that if I had to go back and redo them, I'd probably do them differently. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's, and that ranges from like employing. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, is that a wisdom thing or a regret thing?
It's more wisdom. It's more like
it's not really regret. It's just, I would do it different because I know more now. Sure.
And you learn, and that's the thing. Like, or here's the thing: you make enough mistakes, you learn. You're learning from it. So, I mean, I'll start giving some examples of mistakes, quote unquote, that I feel I've made from pricing and allowing clients to kind of push you around a little bit. Scope creep, which Blake is probably sitting there laughing at me behind me right now going, yep. Things like that, not knowing when to push back. But again, as you grow over time, and it still happens. Like I can't say this without, knowing it's complete bunk, but it still happens. Like it's still, sometimes you're caught between a rock and a hard place and you have to, the client wins out on certain things. But in the beginning, and you can attest to this, it happened more often. It was
way more often.
You turn into a rug at some point and you just kind of get walked all over.
Because you're just trying to find yourself, figure out what you're doing. And I will add to that the concept of scope creep, which is basically just like, if anyone's unfamiliar with the term, what's the scope of work that you are paid to do? Right. And where was that made abundantly clear so that when additional things are asked of you, that's the creep, because that's where you absolutely have the right to say, oh, well, that is an upcharge because it's more time, it's more resources, it's more dollars. I will say, now that we're kind of unpacking this, the biggest mistake and the one thing that I feel like I'm constantly coaching people on is custom work. Now, I'm not saying like if something that you do is made to be custom, that's fine. But there's still probably parameters within how you do that custom work. And it's like your good, better, best sort of packages, right? The biggest trap in the world can be custom work. Like if you don't know what those key packages are for you, you're constantly designing totally custom deliverables with totally custom pricing. And that's where I think imposter syndrome and scope creep play the biggest role, because you are not making it so clear on how you do work, even if you're new to it. I always say that the biggest thing that you can say is how I typically do things, or how we typically do things, is because that says to your client, we do have a process. So yeah, I would say the biggest mistake I've ever made, and the one I continue to learn from, is custom work, because oftentimes you customize the smallest package for the lowest price, and that client usually doesn't even sign on with you after you've done so and taken, all your prices down to make it great for them. It doesn't pay off, because those clients don't end up being the right ones.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to piggyback off of the fact of that whole idea and concept, is that just being more specific with things like deliverables with clients, right? That's you can't just be like, well, we can kind of do this, or we can do providing a range, like we'll provide 3 to 4 of whatever it is, videos. It's got to be one or the other. It's like very specific. We are going to provide 3 videos by this date.
You will get up to 2 edits of that within this frame of
correct.
time.
And so, I know Blake is nodding his head like this, because that's another thing, like edits, right? Edit rounds, that's a huge thing. And that was a mistake that I continue to pay for, because, edit rounds come back. The expectation that has been set is like, oh, unlimited edit rounds. No,
thank you.
That's not how you make money.
No.
Right?
No one's ever going to be happy, because if you can make it perfect, then great.
Right.
But are we trying to ship it? Yeah, we need to get it done.
So there's things like that. Other things I would say, biggest mistakes earlier on were, not having an accountant, not having, lawyers, like things like that. Just reading certain contracts. I've never, knock on wood, had something massive happen in a contract where I got screwed or the client got. So I've never had those, fortunately. But there's been times where it's like, had I fully understood certain things, I would have known what the ongoing payment terms were for a 4-year contract that we signed into, and knowing that was going to cause delays in accounts receivable for 90 to 120 days. Well, I didn't realize these things early on, and they affected the next 3-4 years. Again, you learn how to work within those bounds. So, but if I had to look back and I had to say, or if I had to do it again, or I am doing it again, now you know what to look for. Now you know what to say, like, that's not going to work. That's not going to cut it. And again, this is more, at wisdom and experience as that happens, but knowing what to even ask for. It's hard to look back and say that was a mistake, because you don't know what you don't know at that time.
Yeah.
So if you don't even know what you don't know, how are you supposed to either ask for it? Perfect example with one of our clients, found out 3 years into an engagement with them that they had things as like open POs that were, I didn't even know that was an opportunity, where, accounts receivable went from 120 days down to like 15, twice a month actually, based on what work you were billing for. I didn't even know that existed. I had no idea.
I do think that's a good example of, not just knowing the right people in the company and working with the right people in the company, but the time you spend working with a client that they're like, you know what, you are someone we're pulling work from all of the time. Like, there's a better way to do this so that you don't only get paid twice a year. Because that was, depending on the client, that can be a very real situation of how they get payments out. Knowing that is so big. And another thing I think has popped up a lot in that same vein for us is sort of the deadline thing. Yes, you can offer work and say, oh, great, we're going to do this agreement. We're going to do this many projects over this space of time, but be really specific on when the expiration date is on that. Because things can pop up, plans can change, pandemics can happen. Then you really have to start making some important decisions.
Then you're giving away free work on credit for 3 years. You
don't want to have a project that was paid for 3 years ago that hasn't been redeemed yet. Like, nobody wants to see that happen.
Right.
Because it's just a cash flow issue, no matter how much you need to make good on it.
Yeah.
It's important you make good on all your promises, but make sure your promises are something you can make good on. And I think that's what contracts have the ability to do for you.
Yeah.
When you're fully aware of what's in them.
Yeah,
so that's a big one. I think that's big.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably other things that I can look back and say, like, I could have done that well, but again, to say it's a full-blown mistake, wouldn't be true, because that would mean that I would accept the fact that it doomed me forever. And I don't think that's the case. Any mistake, you have to, it happens, it's a hiccup, and you figure out how to reposition and plan. If I really want to go back and say the biggest mistake, would I have started a production company, period? Like, that could be considered a mistake. But we learned how to pivot and offer certain things that were more in line with our skills. Mm-hmm. So yes, while we could do production, it's also there's a different, we provide it from a different angle, right?
Yeah.
So I could have just doomed that and said, man, we're just a production company. Like, go hang my head and go walk off into the sunset and say, oh, I made a mistake by doing it that way. But we didn't. We learned how to take the production aspect of it and modernize it for modern brand. Like, how do we take that and make it more for what brands are looking for now? And how do we add a little bit of a consulting piece? And so then it actually took that and turned it into a few other opportunities.
Yeah. And I think you just do what you can with what you have where you are. And I would never say that was ever a mistake, because even if it's like, this is just the first iteration of what will be, you get your foot in the door by doing the work people say they want right now, by serving the client for exactly what they want right now. Maybe it's not the most efficient thing. Maybe it's not the thing you want to hang your hat on for the rest of your life. But you get in the door, and then you start to unpack, what are the real problems that we can solve here, and how can we do it in a different way, whether it's more scalable or not. Like, maybe it's just something else entirely. That's oftentimes the better way to sell something else that hasn't really gotten any traction yet, is to have the relationships already built in and the track record that you deliver well on a project.
Right.
I think if I had to say one more mistake, it's, again, like, a lot of this stuff in writing is so important, but to remember that you're still dealing with humans. Right. And one of probably the early mistakes that I made was one of the first social media execution contracts that I had with an author. He signed a contract, said he was going to work with me for 6 months, and he just wasn't paying the third month, and he was having a hard time keeping up with it. And he just said, I need to cancel. And I really went right in on the fact that he signed a contract, rather than going to him in a more human way and communicating, like, how can we make this work? How can we keep working together? How can we do this? Because, of course, I was operating from a place of fear.
Sure.
That I thought I had a secured client. It was really important for me to have a secure client at the time, because everyone was paying the bills. And so I went straight in on the paperwork that I had. The paperwork is a lot. Mm-hmm. It's important for you to have that safety net, but you're still dealing with humans. And I think every time that we've had an opportunity to be human, whether it's an individual that owns a small business or an individual that works for a very, very big business,
still people.
They're still people. And you can usually find a way out if you're willing to be patient and try to stand in their shoes. Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that one. Mistakes aren't end all be alls. Yeah. And as long as you learn from them, it's just going to help you down the road.
I agree.
What do you think? Should they go leave this episode a 5-star rating and a review?
I think that was pretty fire. Yeah.
I think they should.
Yeah.
I think this one gets 5 stars.
I'm using Kylie's words now. Fire.
Kylie really liked my sandwich. That's why she was like, "That is fire." And I was
now
like,
it's stuck in my head.
Well, now you can just say it.
All right. We appreciate all of your true and honest reviews in the Apple Podcast Store.
5 stars.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see
you on the next one.